Looking at the biblical text, it is easy to assume you are reading a disjointed historical record rather than a dense stream of ancient data. The third Aliyah of the Book of Numbers, chapter 5, provides a case study in this type of textual density. On its surface, the text reads like a chaotic list. It jumps abruptly from camp purity to the laws of theft and finally to mandatory priestly donations. But classical rabbinic commentators do not read this as a poorly edited history book. They approach the text as a highly compressed legal dataset. The 11th century scholar Rashi acts as the master cryptographer here, relying on centuries of Talmudic precedent to unpack the density of these verses. These lines contain a tightly coiled, multidimensional jurisprudential system designed for precise decompression. This animated text block represents the entirety of Aliyah 3. We can divide it into 3 distinct structural units, verses 1 through 4, 5 through 8, and 9 and 10. The core methodology of Talmudic hermeneutics involves paying strict attention to textual anomalies rather than writing them off as stylistic choices. In this methodology, an anomaly is a data point, a repeated phrase, a sudden shift in topic, or an apparent logical paradox is a signal that a specific legal mechanic is being introduced. Applying this lens, the first 4 verses yield a precise physical and architectural layout. Verses 5 through 8 generate an update to the penal code, while the final 2 verses extract a sophisticated economic mechanism. By decoding these signals, this single, short section of text provides the complete operational framework for the newly formed Israelite society. Starting with the first block of text, verses 1 through 4 issue a foundational command to remove the impure from the camp. The verse specifies 3 distinct biological and ritual states: the corpse impure, the person with a discharge, known as a zav, and the person with an eruption, known as a tsarua. Drawing on Tractate Pesachim, Rashi rejects a simple binary definition of who is inside versus who is outside the camp. This blueprint shows the true spatial model, a 3-tiered concentric hierarchy centered around the tabernacle. We have the camp of the Shekinah in the center, surrounded by the camp of Levi, which is enclosed by the camp of Israel. The first exclusion vector applies to the corpse impure individual. They are barred from the central Shekinah zone, but they are fully permitted within the outer Levi and Israel zones. The exclusion vector becomes stricter for the Zav. This individual is pushed out of both the Shekinah and Levi zones, restricting them entirely to the outermost Israel zone. The ultimate exclusion applies to the Tsarua. They are ejected completely outside the boundaries of all 3 concentric squares. The logic behind this mapping reveals that the severity of the ritual impurity directly correlates to the required physical distance from the sacred center. Verses 1 through 4 are an algorithmic blueprint, mapping specific biological states directly to physical geography. The text then moves to verses 5 through 8, making an abrupt thematic shift from camp geography to the laws of robbery and false oaths. These specific property laws are repeated from the book of Leviticus, appearing here a second time in the legal code. This diagram compares Leviticus chapter 5 with Numbers chapter 5. Since the Talmudic premise dictates the Torah does not waste space, duplication demands isolating the exact differences to find the new law. Identical text fades away, leaving the single new phrase, "and they confess." This addition is the exegetical delta, the new legislative variable introduced into the equation. The legal impact of this delta is sweeping. It establishes that the specific financial penalties attached to these oaths cannot be triggered by witness testimony alone. By adding "and they confess," the text makes absolute self-incrimination the mandatory threshold for these penalties to apply. The repetition operates as a differential equation. The text uses a familiar baseline to surgically insert a massive update regarding defendants' rights. Within this same block, verse 8 contains a second major anomaly. It outlines a scenario where a robbery victim dies with no kinsman to inherit the restitution. Tractate Sanhedrin raises an immediate logical objection. How can any Israelite have absolutely 0 heirs? This network graph shows why that is a problem. Because all Israelites share a common ancestry dating back to the patriarch Jacob, a biological Israelite will always have at least a distant cousin legally eligible to inherit. To satisfy the condition of having no kinsman whatsoever, we must find a legally isolated individual, completely disconnected from this massive family tree. This isolated node represents the intestate proselyte, a convert to Judaism who dies without Jewish heirs. The verse is exclusively addressing this unique legal status. The text provides a precise legal resolution for this scenario. In the event of this absolute inheritance vacuum, the restitution funds default directly to the active priestly shift. The rabbinic reading takes an apparent logical impossibility and reveals a deliberate legislative edge case, ensuring this isolated demographic has a formalized place in property law. The final block of text, verses 9 and 10, mandates the donation of sacred agricultural gifts to the priesthood. Verse 10 presents a blatant textual paradox. If a gift is legally mandated to be given away, how can the verse declare that every man's holy things shall be his? To resolve this, the text introduces the complex rabbinic concept of Tovat Hana'ah, or the benefit of discretion. This flowchart maps the mechanics. While the resource must be given to the priestly class as a whole, the individual farmer retains the absolute proprietary right to choose exactly which specific priest receives it. This is the exact opposite of a centralized tax collection system. A priest cannot simply arrive at a farm and extract the wealth by force. The social consequence of this economic mechanic is immediate. Priests must actively cultivate goodwill and provide value to the community to be chosen by the laity. By placing the routing choice in the hands of the individual, the system actively prevents clerical corruption and the hoarding of institutional power. The paradox in the text resolves into an elegant economic equilibrium, balancing mandatory sacred taxation with decentralized individual property rights. Numbers chapter 5 functions as a dense cluster of operational regulations for the wilderness camp. The text establishes a rigid spatial boundary, mapping ritual purity directly to the physical architecture of the encampment. A second boundary updates the penal code and integrates the isolated proselyte into the economic framework. This visualization brings all three models together, including the final economic system, defining the limits of clerical power through the benefit of discretion. Rabbinic methodology treats anomalies, paradoxes, and repetitions as deliberate, load-bearing structures rather than errors. Classical exegesis decompresses the text, transforming ancient ink into a logically robust operating system.